happens sometimes. Managed to oversleep. Almost missed an interview I had with Chicago. Managed to wake up without my coffee and say absolutely nothing on the radio this morning because I wasn't at my best. Yeah, I will totally marry you. Thanks for asking. Yeah, Trump's meeting with Obama. I assume none of that will be televised until the end. That's got to be an interesting meeting. Can you imagine Trump and Obama in an actual private meeting where they could actually just say anything they want to say? Nobody's watching, nobody's recording it. Just a total honest conversation between those two people. Oh my God, that would be interesting. Michelle is showing Melania around. Wow. I think Trump's going to get along with more people than people assume. I think the big surprise from Trump is that he's not scary. I notice you. Yeah, the stock market's up. What's that tell you? So nobody's leaving the USA? All the people who said they were going to go? Not going? What's the situation with the protests? Are they still on the streets, or did they get tired and go home? Because I haven't looked at the news yet this morning. Still marching or no? Has Soros funded more? Database of your Periscope friends? Well, I think that I can see them on a list. It died down a little bit? Okay. So I blogged already this morning, in case you haven't seen it. And I was talking about how do you unhypnotize a Clinton supporter who believes that we just elected the next coming of Hitler, and it's the step that happens before everybody who's not an Aryan is rounded up and shipped out of the country. Because believe it or not, there's some portion of the public who actually believes that Trump is going to deport citizens. I don't know where that came from, which could be no more opposite of the reality. Yeah, the reality is he's pro-citizen, pro-legal citizen. So if you're a legal citizen and you're worried that he's gonna ship you out, you really haven't been paying attention. So here's the idea that I put out there. And by the way, I know that you hate this idea, or at least many of you do. And that's part of why I do it, because if I can make an idea you're pretty sure you hate look at least worth considering, then you can actually feel the persuasion. And I think that's just a fun thing. Yeah, why are gays freaking out? I was going to ask the same question. What is the anti-gay policy that Trump is in favor of? To the best of my knowledge, he says that even gay marriage you leave to the states, right? Does he have any anti-gay thoughts? I mean, I know the positive things he said about protecting the LGBTQ community. I know that he hires gay people. He's obviously good with Peter Thiel. I can't see any reason that gay people should be marching against him. And by the way, Peter Thiel is literally a genius. Why would he support somebody who's discriminating against him? Doesn't make any sense. Yeah, Milo's obviously not afraid of Trump. He's a contrarian. Oh, Pence is the problem? Well, Pence was anti-gay marriage. Isn't that the only thing that was a Pence problem? Yeah, And I've got a feeling that that will moderate during a Trump administration. So the reason I don't talk about Soros is that I don't believe any of it. It just sounds like the boogeyman. Oh, Soros. I mean, Soros is sort of the equivalent of Trump is Hitler. It's the thing that's such a big deal that it probably couldn't be true. Which is not to say that Soros has done nothing. I'm sure he's done some things to try and control the situation, but how big a control does he have? I mean, Trump won, right? He doesn't have that much control. Do I really think we're going to go backwards? Not a chance. It's forward all the way. I don't see how we're going to go backwards. So here's what I talked about in my blog today. Damn it, my nose is itchy, you persuasive bastards. I talked about how you dehypnotize someone who thought that Trump is the beginning of the next, Hitler or Nazi regime. And apparently, a lot of people think that. That's why they're on the streets. So the trouble is that the fear of Hitler is about the biggest fear you could have. So you can't persuade people away from that by saying there's something even scarier. Because what the hell would be scarier than Hitler taking over? Nothing. Nothing would be scarier than that. So you can't use fear. But you also can't talk people out of fear. There's no logical argument that can talk someone out of fear. You can't show them facts. So you have to get at it from a persuasion perspective. And I don't have a perfect answer yet, but just for fun, just to demonstrate, some of the thinking around persuasion, I'm going to throw out a few ideas. None of these are the answer yet, but they'll give you some sense of the way you would approach it. One way would be that I've observed that the people who are on the streets, the protesters, the people who are most upset, are young. They seem to be under 30 at least. And my guess is that a lot of those people are not aware that Republican candidates for president are all called Hitler. So one way that you could approach it is to create a meme, for example, that shows all the Republicans that have been accused of being Hitler. And people will look at them and say, oh, those were just normal presidents. We were afraid in the beginning, but at the end, no. Maybe you didn't like their policy. Maybe you didn't like that we attacked Iraq. There are lots of things not to like. But they didn't look especially racist. And certainly none of them rose to the level of Hitler or pre-Hitler or really even headed in that direction. Just nothing like that happened. So you could give them historical context and remind them that every generation has thought the next Republican candidate was going to be Hitler. But that's a little bit of a logical argument. And while it does give some context, it would have about a 10% persuasion power, not enough to flip anybody. But here's another idea. The other idea is that Trump, realizing he has a problem in this regard, could do something that's so out of the frame, so out of the box, that you couldn't hold that thought in your head at the same time you're trying to think that Trump is the next Hitler. So he has to do something so non-Hitler and so newsworthy that it just replaces in your head the space you were using for thinking he was Hitler, because you can't hold both of those thoughts in your head. All right, so let me give you an example. And in my example, don't assume that I think this is a good idea. It's just an example of persuasion, all right? Although it might be a good idea. And the idea was this. To imagine, this is just a mental process here, all right? Just imagine it. It's a thought experiment. Imagine President-elect Trump saying he wanted to do something along the lines of reparations for slavery. Now, as soon as you hear those words, the country goes crazy, all right? So you got a headline. All right, so the first thing you have to do is make sure that what you're doing is in the headlines and is so interesting and provocative that people can't avoid focusing on it. It's just too interesting. So as soon as I say reparations, slavery, Trump, you're all in, right? You're going to read that story. You're going to click on that link. You got to figure out what the hell's going on there, right? That's classic man bites dog situation. It's like, wait, did you say Trump is proposing something with slavery reparations? I got to find out what that's all about. All right. Now, since it would be impossible to have a straight reparations where there's just a transfer of money from, Asians and Latinos to African Americans. That's not going to happen, right? So there'd be no point in talking about something that simplistic. But let me put it in this context. Suppose the idea was that only the top 1% are taxed, a special 25-year tax that times out after 25 years. And the only place that money can go is for free college education and trade school for African Americans who want to get an education, want to better their situation. Now, you can't get it any other way, so it's just education specific. Ask yourself who's against that, because if you're not in the top 1%, then all you're seeing is that African Americans are getting a good deal. Yeah, it would be a cuckold tax. It would be called that for sure. But that's what makes it interesting, right? I mean, you guarantee that it gets in the headlines. And if you came in late, this is a mental experiment, not an actual proposal. And the mental experiment is, how would you get rid of the Hitler framework that Clinton's supporters are putting on Trump now to get so excited? And the way you can do it is step out of the box and say, just an example, I'm not proposing this. Suppose Trump said a special tax just on the top 1% of the wealthy, just for 25 years, and just for free college for African Americans. Now, at the same time, the only way you could get away with that is to say that this is the first stage of free college for everybody. But somebody has to go first, right? You have to decide who goes first. So one way to do it would be to allow African Americans to go first, and then try to work toward a place where everybody can get it too. Why should rich blacks get affirmative action? Why not? So the beauty is you could really argue both ways. Fairness is as I often say, fairness is a concept that was invented so that idiots could have something to argue about. Fairness is not an objective quality of the universe. There are simply some things that are useful and some things that are not useful. And if you look at it through that framework, everything starts to make sense. And I think it would be useful to lower the racial tensions and to, as much as possible, try to erase the stain of slavery that's still hanging over the country. And this would be one way to do it. Taxing 1% is anti-Semitic. Yeah, every racial myth and every racial accusation in the world would come out, which is what makes it so interesting. So say that again. I saw somebody say that India did something just for the lower caste system. What did they do? Was it education? It would reinforce people acting ridiculous to get stuff? In what way? There's only one history of slavery, and you can't compare that to any other human experience. So here's the thing. If you look at it as a transfer from some types of people to other types of people, it looks unfair, just like every other transfer. But what's different is that it would solve a problem. It would solve a couple of problems. One is it would get rid of the frame that we're a racist country that just elected a potentially racist president. I don't think we did, but that's, whether you think it's real or not, people think it's real. So you would pay money to change people's minds. Let's put it in another form. How much would you pay to change people's minds that we're a big old racist country and you can't get ahead because of racism? Suppose you could just change nothing except people's minds. That's the only thing you're changing. You're just changing their mind and making them think, oh, there's no racial problem in the country. I just have to work hard and do what I can. What would you pay to just change people's thought process? Zero. Well, here's the thing. If you think you would pay zero, then you also think that the current situation has no cost to you. And I think you're wrong about that. I think the current racial tension, and certainly there might be more of it, so that's the bigger problem, has a cost to all of us. If you were trying to drive in New York City yesterday and you couldn't because there were riots in the streets, not riots, but protesters, that had a cost on you. If you're trying to hire and you can't find enough qualified people with college educations, that has a cost to you. If everything you do is under a cloud of racial suspicion, that has a cost to you. If 10, 20%, 30% of the population of the country thinks they're getting a raw deal, so much so that they won't support the administration, that has a cost to you. So the economist in me, by the way, that's my degree is economics. The economist in me says there are tons of costs to the mental set that we're a racist country and we have a racist leader. If it's not true. If it's true, you want to have the most accurate impression you can so you can do something about it. If it's not true, you don't want it to be inaccurately thought to be true. So what would you pay to make that inaccurate thought go away? Billions. You would pay billions to make that go away because the cost is certainly in the billions. We're all descended from slaves if you go back far enough. Yeah, all those arguments about fairness and blah, blah. The only all the conversations about fairness, they're wasted time. There's just what's useful. And if you could temporarily favor one group in the country, no matter who they are, it doesn't have to be African Americans, could be anybody else. If you could temporarily favor that group, let's call them Albonians, but it would be good for you in the long run, wouldn't that be useful? It would be completely unfair because you'd be favoring one group over another. But if everybody was better off in the long run, isn't that useful? How about we treat everyone equally? The problem is that that's not possible because what is fair is what's in your mind. So if you try to fix the reality, there's a limit to how much you can do because reality is hard to change that much. But you can change how people think about reality. That's much less expensive. Yeah, you need to give people the perception that they're equal if you want them to act like they live in an equal country. Paying is admitting guilt, therefore, yeah, it is admitting guilt. Of course it's admitting guilt. But, not personally. You and I were not alive during slavery. But why would we not admit that the country started with a deep disadvantage for the black population at the end of slavery? There's nothing you can really compare to that. There's no other experience that's a lot like slavery. There's nothing like that. In the same way that anytime you try to compare something to the Holocaust, that's got to be a little bit insulting for anybody who was affected by it directly, because there's nothing like the Holocaust. Slavery is awful, but It's not like the Holocaust. Native American genocide, yeah. Actually, you could find lots of things that are equally terrible, but they would all be different. There's nothing quite like the Native American genocide. But if you look at that example, Native Americans do have some form of reparation. It's called gambling and reservations. And there's probably scholarships and stuff. So the Native American situation is an example of reparations, I would argue, because they do have special rights that are not afforded to other Americans. Yeah, if you were trying to do reparations where every non African American transferred money to every African American, nobody's going to get behind that, right? Because then you would have poor white people giving money to rich black people. Nobody's going to be behind that. But if you tax only the top 1%, no matter who they were, and you gave it only to college education, the top 1% are going to get their money back, right? Because the better educated the population is, the more money that people at the top can make. They got people to hire, people to make money to buy stuff. We want a rich country because we want to be able to sell stuff into it. That's what keeps you rich. Reparations are not justified, nor am I saying they're justified, nor am I saying that they need to be justified in order to do them. The standard that I would suggest is not fairness, because that's an illusion, always is, and nobody ever agrees what fair is. Not justified, because nothing's justified. That's just a mental process. You just imagine things are justified. Nothing's justified. What's true is that some things work and some things don't. And if you're trying to change how people think about racism and discrimination, you want to do something that works. And from a persuasion perspective, if the top 1% were taxed for essentially slave reparations to give free education to all African Americans, it would be hard to hold that in your head and still think that the person who suggested it was a racist, because the racist would be acting as aggressively opposite of the label as you could possibly get, right? So people wouldn't be able to hold those two thoughts in their head. They'd have to choose. And it would be hard to ignore a headline about reparations. You can't ignore it. It's impossible to ignore. Adam Carolla show, that would be interesting. More subsidy would make college worth less. Yeah. Now, I think you could also come up with a plan that looks like reparations without the unfairness. So you could tax the top 1% only, and you could say that anybody who's in a certain level of economic situation, below a certain level, just gets free college, and you could just start moving that up over time. And I think that gets the most disadvantaged people first. But we probably already have something like that. Yeah, I'm getting requests to do various shows and stuff, and I actually have more requests than I can even answer. So if someone on here has asked me to return a message about appearing on a radio show or doing an interview, I apologize, because I have more of them than I can answer right now. Ben Affleck, that's a weird thing to put in there. Irritating example. Yeah, it's irritating by design. So I was trying to make something you couldn't get out of your head. Yeah, you'd have lots of exceptions. The thing you have to realize is that with any kind of reparations plan, you can't design it to be fair, because actually that should never be the standard. There's going to be a whole bunch of unfairness in it, and you just have to get over that. Because the question is, Does it work? All right. Is it useful? Does it get you something that's better than what you had, even if there's a cost to it? That's the standard. Soros is behind the protesters. I don't know. Hydroponics for everyone. How about we breed kids to be colorblind? I'll tell you, let me tell you about my stepkids. They're 16 and 19 now, but when they were younger, if you ask me what music they're listening to, it's all African-American music, African-American artists. Pretty much 100% of it, give or take, Eminem and, a couple of artists who are pretending to be black artists. If you look at their sports heroes, they tend to be African-American sports heroes. And if you looked at their friends, they had a healthy representation of African-American friends, people they wanted to hang out with. If you asked who they wanted to date, I won't get into that, but African-Americans were high on their list of dateable opportunities. So I look at my own kids raised in a mostly white neighborhood in this generation, and they're beyond colorblind. They actually have a distinct preference for black friends, black entertainment, black athletes. My observation is that they actually have a positive bias. And if you're worried about the future of the country, you just have to look at, I'm sorry, CNN just sent me a text asking me to be on tomorrow. So, do they hate whites? No, I'm not going to say that anybody's colorblind because clearly that's not really possible. But the kids being born today, they believe that a woman can be president because why not? Like, it doesn't even make sense. If you're born today, it will be strange to you that anybody said, imagine somebody asking a 6-year-old today, can a woman be president? The 6-year-old will look at you like it's a trick question. Like, duh, of course. Like, why are you even asking me that question? And I think likewise, at least the kids in this area, California, first white ever in her home, my God. Why are celebrities supporting Hillary? Because celebrities work on public approval. Do you need more on that? Celebrities require public approval, and you can't be a Trump supporter in public and still expect to get a movie deal. How can you assure my friends that Trump isn't a monster? Check my blog for unhypnotizing them that he's scary, but I need to work on the unhypnotizing people that he's a racist specifically. So one problem with the optics of the protesters is their youth. And I realize that it doesn't play that way, but it's just fun to consider. If you were to identify the one group in society who understands the least about everything, just how the world works, the group that understands the least would be the youngest people in every group, right? Now, the young people have more understanding of, popular culture and music, and there are a whole bunch of things that the young have more appreciation for, but they're not really important. They tend to be in the entertainment domain. The group that is dumbest within every group, so whether you're talking about men or women or any ethnic group, the dumbest people within that group are the younger ones, right? Because we get more experienced, we get more appreciation for more topics, we learn more as we grow. So if you look at the protesters, they really skew young. Many of them look like they're below voting age. So we have this weird situation where the people who, by any objective measure, are the least knowledgeable about the world are the ones protesting and trying to convince the people who, by any objective measure, know far more than they do about the world that they're all wrong. Now, they might be right? You can't rule out the fact that the people who have the least amount of knowledge and experience and information got it right, because that happens sometimes. But what are the odds, right? If you were to take any situation in which all of the young people under, let's say, 25 were on one side, and all of the over 25s were on the other side, and it was something about how to run the world, it required an understanding of human nature that takes a long time to understand, it would look ridiculous that all the people who are demonstrably and objectively the least knowledgeable in every demographic group, all the least knowledgeable people have banded together to form a movement of the ignorant. Now, obviously, it's not being reported that way, but objectively, isn't that true? Here's the second thing to think about. The biggest problem that the protesters have right now is that they lost the election, right? I mean, it kind of comes down to that. And why did they lose the election? Right? You could argue because something policy or something, the candidate wasn't strong enough or something persuasion, right? But the fact is, if more of Clinton's supporters had simply gotten off the couch and driven down to the polling booth and pushed a button, she'd be president, right? So you have a villain here, and the villain is the people who are in the group protesting against themselves, because the people who didn't vote are the people protesting. Now, I assume most of the protesters probably did vote, but the people they're protesting on behalf of are the ones who didn't vote. I mean, here I'm generalizing because most people who are active did vote probably, but not enough of them, and they had the option. It's not like they didn't know what was at stake. It's not like they didn't know how to vote. It's not like they didn't know when election day was. It's not like they didn't know which candidate was supporting what things. Some of them decided to sleep in that day. Some of them had other priorities. Right? So if you look at the protest, you should protest your own side that failed you so miserably by not going to work that day. I mean, I put it in humorous terms, but now that I've given you the context, I'll give it the quick humorous take. The quick humorous take is that the reason people are protesting, it comes down to the fact that the people on their side decided to sleep in that day. They decided to take the day off. All they had to do was go to work. And by work, I mean go to the voting booth and push a button. They just had to go to work once. There was only one day this year they had to go to work to change their lives, according to them. That's not my opinion. I'm saying according to the protesters and their worldview, if their own people, the people on their side, had just gone to work one day, just one day. And here, work I'm using as a euphemism for going to the voting booth and pushing a button. Maybe a couple hours out of their day. That's all they're asking. Just go to work for a couple hours one day of the year. Totally change your living situation. Change the world, save the world. Save the world from the monster that is Trump. All you had to do is go to work, right? But you won't see that spin on it. And by the way, one of the big reasons that I imagined Trump would win in a surprising way is that I did imagine not just that there was more enthusiasm in Trump crowds, but that it is, by and large, a group of people who think you need to solve your own problems. If you could characterize Trump supporters and Republicans in general with one statement, it wouldn't be we're a bunch of racists. It wouldn't be that. I say we. I'm not technically a conservative or Republican, but that wouldn't be the defining characteristic of Republicans. because there's a lot of, diversity in that group as well. The defining characteristic of Republicans is they're not waiting for you to solve their problem, if they can solve it themselves. So if a Republican can solve their own problem, they set their alarm clock, they wake up on time, and then they go fucking solve their problem. Because there couldn't have been a more clear path to it. It's called the election. Push this button, solve your problem if that's what you think it is. If you think your problem is who's the president, solve it. Set your alarm clock. Maybe schedule a little better. So my take on things was that Republicans as a group are a group that expect to solve their own problems. And if you give them an opportunity to do it, they'll say, okay, that's hard, but it solves my problem. So now I'm going to go do a hard thing because that was the path. All right. Just tell me the price and then I'll pay it. That's sort of the Republican point of view. And on the other side, there's a little bit of a sense that someone else needs to solve your problem. So much so that maybe they didn't need to go vote. All right. I don't really need to solve this problem myself. I just need to complain about it until someone else solves it. So I see that as the biggest mental difference between the two parties. All right. Took a week off to watch the meltdown. Yeah, I think the Republicans in California did not vote. That's true, or lots of them, because there wasn't much point in it, and that probably did help Clinton win the popular. Yeah. Don't you think the protesters should be protesting the people on their side who didn't vote? Because if you think about it, the stuff that Trump has proposed are not really things the protesters are protesting against. Let me start from the beginning, because this is a wild thought. So if you don't listen from the beginning, it might not make sense. The protesters are not protesting things that Trump has either done or will do based on his proposals. All right? What they're protesting is what they think in their imagination he has done, because they imagine he said things that were far worse than what he actually meant. And they imagine that he will do things that he hasn't proposed. In other words, he'll come up with crazy racist policies that he's never even talked about, nobody's ever talked about. So they're protesting their own delusions, as someone just said here. And we've never seen that before, have we? Maybe it's possible all protests are really against delusions, but I've never seen such a clear example where people have actually taken to the street to protest their own imagination of what would happen in the future, based on no clues. There's no objective information. There's no Trump policy that would suggest that, nor do we have a structure in the United States that would ever support it. One of the things Hitler had going for him is he did not have social media nipping at his heels all the time. And I said this in my blog, but let me say it again here. As long as there's social media and we can see what happens on every street corner, ideally, in some cases we can find out what happens in every email. We have recorded conversations. We have whistleblowers. It would be really hard for any Hitler-like thing to get purchased and really get big enough that you couldn't stop it. I mean, obviously, there will be flare-ups everywhere, but we stop them. That's been our history for years and years and years. A little bit of a flare-up of racism, bam, society just corners it and just stomps on it. All right, we've done it over and over and over again. And now with social media, it's far easier to do it, because we can identify problems earlier and we can attack them earlier. So here's the thing I want to say. As long as there's social media, the odds of going full Hitler are zero. The risk is that your leader gets rid of your social media and tries to control the messaging. All right? There's no chance that Trump is going to control the messaging of the mainstream media unless he shut it down. And there's no chance he's going to control social media unless he shut it down. Now, what would happen if a President Trump tried to shut down either social media or the mainstream media? The answer is that Trump supporters would take to the street and overthrow the government, because there's no Trump supporter who's going to put up with controlling the media or shutting down social media. No Trump supporter is going to be in favor of that. Not one. Not only would they take to the streets with the Clinton supporters under that situation, but they'd be in front, because they're the ones who have the guns, the good ones, So the irony is that all the people protesting are protesting against people who are not just on their side, but they're more militarily on their side and aggressively on their side than they could ever imagine. Just imagine a situation where social media or the networks get shut down by some administration. It doesn't have to be Trump, but he's the one you're afraid of. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's the guy we elected. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you voted for him. If he shuts down social media, you're going to be in the street, and you're going to overthrow that motherfucker. Both sides are going to be on the same side. So you actually have these people in the street who are protesting an imaginary future where the people in their country somehow don't have their best interests in mind. And I don't think that's the case. I think everybody who's a Trump supporter wants the country to do well, and anybody in the country. I think I had a different point before I started talking about that. But the main point is the protests are against their own imagination at this point. So if you want to change somebody's imagination, you have to do it with some kind of out-of-the-box proposal or action or messaging, something that's so unexpected that they can't hold in their mind this fearful imaginary future along with whatever's happening at the moment that's breaking their frame. Persuasion-wise, you got to break their frame. Flag burning, yeah. I'm generally in favor of, well, let me word this a different way. I'm in favor of anybody having the right to burn a flag, and I certainly wouldn't want to live in a country where you couldn't burn a flag. All right, so you can hate somebody burning a flag. I have such mixed reactions when I see it. Normally, when somebody's burning a flag, there's a pretty good chance I'm not on the same side as the flag burner, whatever their point is. But I still feel a little tingle of patriotism when somebody burns a flag. I mean, I really do. Because I'm just so happy to live in a country where you can do that. Imagine if you lived in a country where somebody sets a flag on fire and then you watch the military drag them away. Who wants to live in that country? So every time I see the flag burned, I feel, as most Americans, I feel that discomfort. I feel personally insulted. I feel offended. I feel appalled. I feel all of that. And then simultaneously, I feel patriotic because I'm just so happy to live in a country where somebody can do that and the military doesn't drag them away. You're having a 60s flashback, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting feeling, isn't it? You can't have a clean feeling of either loving flag burning or hating it, because if you don't have a mixed feeling about that, there's something wrong with your empathy. Yeah, the protests are a side effect of Clinton's framing of Trump as Hitler, and supporting that framing, and her surrogates in particular. So yeah, every time you see somebody framing him as Hitler, they're making the world a worse place. Because if you don't trust social media to keep an eye on him, you don't understand what social media is. And if you don't trust Trump supporters to be on your side, if social media was somehow constricted, then you don't know anything about the Trump supporters. They're not going to be just on your side. They're going to be in front of you if freedom starts eroding in this country. It doesn't matter if it's freedom. The Trump supporters are not looking for freedom for white people. That's just ridiculous. Any freedom that went away for anybody in this country would be a major cause of concern for Trump voters, and I think you're completely misunderstanding where they're coming from if you think they want anybody's freedom or safety to be decreased in this country. That would be the opposite of what they want. Well, I think social media had its role in all this. Hillary would have eroded our freedoms. You can make that argument about every president, I think. So Trump got far more of the woman vote than people expected. So could it be that the shy Trump supporters were women who couldn't admit to other women that they were supporting Clinton? I think so. I think the other thing, I said this before, is that, hold on a second. When you support a president, you're also picking a brand, and you're associating that brand with yourself. And because Clinton's brand was first woman president, more than any other female politician and more than any other politician, I think women said, she's representing me. And to the extent that she was horrible and crooked, I think people said, yeah, I would really, really like a woman to be president for a change, but not a crooked one, because that's going to be on me. Whatever bad stuff she does is going to reflect on me, because she got elected partly because she's a woman. All right? So you can't have the because I'm a woman framing to get elected and then expect all women to go for that, because they might say, I'm not sure that's the association I want. Yeah, a woman here just said she's a Trump supporter and took a lot of crap until she just shut up. What's your questions that I never talk about? Your smile. What will I talk to Joe Rogan about? I don't know, whatever he wants to talk about. That's next week. I'm not sure when it runs, though. Did I help the Trump campaign undercover? Well, I'm far from undercover, because every idea I have ends up in my blog or tweeted. And I do know that they were at least aware of my blog, and some of them were reading it. The thing you can never know is how much is influence and how much is coincidence. I can tell you that I intended to influence the campaign and influence the election. And I can tell you that the way I wanted things to go often seemed to go that way. But there were also things that were a little bit obvious to anybody who was a professional politician or a campaigner or campaign staff. So there's no way to know that anything I suggested or thought made a difference. You might have influenced the Clinton campaign. In what way? You got your license plate as Bigley. Oh, by the way, for everybody who kept saying to me that I didn't understand, he was really saying big league instead of Bigley. I know what he was trying to say. I mean, I didn't know that at first, but I paid attention, and it was obvious he was saying big league. But Bigley is just such a better word. It's way better. Oh, yeah, I will post my media appearances. So one of the many things that my startup does and it wasn't built for this. It's just coincidentally one of the things it can do, because it can do a ton of things. One of the things it can do is help me organize my blog topics and also my predictions and my media appearances in a real handy way, so you can visualize them and scroll through them and see them in order. But got to get a couple more bugs out of that. We're very close on that. And then I'll start posting that on my blog below my signature, so that you'll always have a reference to go back and look at my media appearances and predictions and stuff. Clinton campaign saw my blog and decided to use that to combat Trump. No, I think I was blogging about the Hitler fear thing after they started doing it. That would not be based on my suggestion. I wouldn't suggest that, actually, because I think it's too dangerous, as you can see now. Electoral votes can still be reversed. True that. It can be. Was Clinton drunk? Yeah, I would say that. So take this into consideration. And here I'm not going to make up any facts. All right. So I think everything I'm going to say now is factual. It's a fact that the biggest fear that people have about Trump is that he would be unstable around the nuclear codes, and that he wouldn't be able to make the right decision in an emergency. You know, when the situation was tough, he couldn't handle it. So that was your biggest fear. Keep in mind that he's not a drinker, and he's never had a public or private meltdown that's ever been reported. Nobody's ever said that. Now, they say he says crazy things, but he seems to be completely in control and in his proper frame of mind when he says them. He's not, he's not foaming at the mouth or anything like that. He always looks like he's pretty much in control of his situation. And when he says things that are outrageous, he means to say them in most times. Sometimes he just misspeaks, but that's not the end of the world. Now compare that to, and by the way, I'm going to blow your fucking mind right now, because if you haven't put these two things together, shame on you. I've taught you nothing. All right. Here's the two things I'm going to put together. One is that the biggest problem the other side had with Trump is that he'd be unstable around the nuclear codes and just be a crazy person. Two is what you just watched. You watched Clinton get bad news about her votes, about the election night, and be unable to talk to the public in person. Actually unable, literally disabled by bad news. She was disabled by bad news in front of you, meaning that she hid when she should have come out. I don't know how many times I can say that. She was literally disabled by news. All right. I heard a report of someone who claimed to be an insider saying that she was reportedly, and again, this is hearsay, but probably true, that she had called a friend, and she was sobbing so badly on election night that the friend couldn't understand her, didn't even understand what she was trying to say, and that she was blaming Comey and blaming Obama for not trying hard enough and blaming other people. Now, her biggest argument is that she wasn't that. All right? Just think about that. Her most powerful argument was that she's not the person she showed us to be on election night, which is someone who couldn't handle an emergency, couldn't handle an emotional situation. Now, what happens, and by the way, I would be amazed if she didn't have some drinks that night. All right, so social drinker or problem drinker, it doesn't matter. She probably had some drinks that night. So if she couldn't even be shown in public and she was irreconcilable and all those things, it's all the things she claimed Trump would be, which is unfit to be the president when the big problem comes down. And then she proved that she's that person. She literally couldn't even talk in public when there was a problem. And that problem only involved her. The pollsters weren't wrong, they were co-opted. I would say they were co-opted, but not necessarily by money or persuasion, but rather, I think they just, when they get to choose the assumptions they make, they can choose ones that are favorable for one side or the other. So I think, yes, their unconscious bias chose them to imagine that the assumptions they made were perfectly reasonable, when history shows that they were not. Wronger, longer. So what was the final percentage? Somebody do me the math. What percentage of electoral votes did Trump get out of 100%? Somebody do that math for me. Did he get to 306? 306 divided by 538? Is it 528 or 538? So 306 divided by 538 is what percentage? Okay. Is it 65%? It's 56%, yeah, 57%. All right, so let's call it 57%. I called it as a landslide, and it seems like the news is going out of its way not to call it a landslide. Now, I understand that the popular vote was close, so it certainly was not a landslide from the popular vote or anything close to it. 70% is a landslide. I don't know. If you're pushing 60%, I will say, however, that if the Access Hollywood tape had not come out, I think that would be closer to 65%. So I was not accurate that it was a classic landslide. Slappish. Oh, so that includes the two that have not fully been counted yet, right? Your editor made you change it. Yeah, I think if you call it an electoral landslide, yeah, it's still sort of on the edge. I think you could go either way on whether that's a landslide. Screen flipping. What happened was that the screen by itself, I'm not touching the phone at all. It's just leaning up against my computer. It sometimes switches to the rear camera on its own. I don't know if that's a bug or some kind of weird shadow banning. Now I'm back. You can see me now, right? Wait a second, and my picture comes back. All right, can you hear me? Well, I think I'm about done for today anyway. I've done my duty for today. I'm going to go do some work. And you folks have a terrific time. Somebody had told me before to make sure that I've swiped down to get ready for these goodbyes so that they're not awkward, and I've done that. I'm prepared. Watch this. Goodbye, everybody.